welcome to the Mystery Virtual Sew Along Prep video. Today, I am going to be showing you some fun tips, tricks, and tools of cutting out your mystery quilt. My name is Anna Gardner from Stitch and Snip. I'm glad that you were able to join me today. So the first thing is we need to get our cutting instructions out. So here is my sheet of cutting instructions. On our cutting instructions, there's actually 3 sizes of quilts, and so we have to make sure that we're following the correct one here. So the first number size, the first one in parentheses is the table runner, and the second one is queen size. So we want to make sure that we are following along. One option is you can use a highlighter to highlight the ones that you're going to be doing, or circle them so you can keep track of the numbers that we have. The other thing that was in your kit, or if you did not purchase a kit, is we have some labels here that we're going to label our fabrics as we cut them, and so we can use them in the pattern when we need them. So you can make those yourself, or again pull them out of your kit so they're ready to go. So that's our first starting. So today we're going to be talking about cutting, and one of my favorite tools of cutting is called a Shape Cut Plus. It is a plastic template that has little slots in it every 1/2 inch as we go up here. With this, there is different brands out there. This one I've been working with for years and years and years, which is a June Taylor brand. There's also some new ones from Checkers that is a creative grid called Stripology. If you want one of those or have used one of those, the best one is the extra large, because then we can keep the fabric nicely in here as we cut. There's some pros and cons to both. So this one is old school. It's very simple. There's not much lines or things to it, and it's very basic, but it does not have any slip or non-slip grip on the back of it. So there's a couple of tricks I'm going to show you today to be able to do that. With the other one, it does have that non-slip with it, but it is thicker, so I can only go through about 4 layers with it, or this ruler I can go up to 8 layers. So again, we have a little bit different pros and cons of what we can do with the particular rulers. So if you have one at home, pull it out and let's show you how to use it. So the first thing before we can start to cut is we have to do some prep work for our fabrics to get it ready so we can cut it here. So the first thing that we have is we want to go ahead and iron all of our fabrics until we've gotten all the creases out of it, and we have a nice pretty piece like this. So the first thing is we're going to fold it just like it came off the bolt, which is our selvage to selvage. When we do this, we want to kind of find the grain line of the fabric to get it as straight as possible. So what we do is we fold our 2 selvages together, and you can see on the bottom there where it kind of twists and it's not quite laying flat. We're going to move this top layer back and forth until we get it to lay really nice and flat. If I keep going, you can see it folds the other direction. And so we want to find that nice and even section. That's as close as we're going to get to the grain line. I'm going to move down and do it, since this is a longer piece, down here also at the bottom, and make sure it's looking pretty nice for me. So I'm going to slide it just a wee bit here. Once we have it where we want it and it looks really nice, we're going to go ahead and set it down and do a nice little crease, just a finger press across the bottom here. That will give us a nice little starting spot. Now from here, in order to use a shape cut, we need a little bit smaller than the half width of the 42-inch white fabric. So we're going to fold it one more time. When we go to fold it one more time, we're going to be doing quite a bit of sub-cutting. And so when we go to sub-cut, I like to put this fold right below the selvage edge here. And so when we go to sub-cut, we can make sure that we're going to cut off our selvages as we cut our pieces up. And that just helps that we don't waste a lot of fabric. So we're just going to be cutting the fold off, and also all of these selvages that we have here. Once we have it laid out, I'm going to go ahead and finish the piece here. And we're going to do a nice little finger press and get it all nice and flat. just gonna roll this up just a little bit so we can get it to fit on my small little cutting mat here. Now, when we go to cut our fabric, I don't know about you, but have you ever gotten a piece that is a long strip and it goes really, really straight, and then all of a sudden it kind of curves up a little bit and then goes straight again? We call those rainbow strips. And what is happening is when we're cutting, anytime we have a fold on the fabric, you're gonna get a mirror image with it. And what we mean by that is anytime there's a fold, when we open it up, it's gonna give you that mirror image. So we have to cut an exact 90 degrees from that fold in order for us to get a straight strip. If we cut just a little bit off of that fold, we actually have more fabric on one side than the other side of the strip, and that's where we get that bend or that curve in the center here. So the shape cut's gonna help us with that, and that's one of the reasons why I love this, is I'm gonna go ahead and set it down on top here. And we have little lines. So our first line is we have a 0 line across here. We also have a 0 line that goes up where our cutting is. Anytime we have a fold, we need to cut exactly 90 degrees from that fold. But guess what? We have 2 folds on this particular piece because we did fold it twice. So this fold and this fold need to be parallel together in order to cut at 90 degrees from there. So we're going to check and make sure that that fold lines up pretty nice along this section up here. And if it looks good, then we're ready to cut. If it's not quite right, that's where we can adjust that second fold to make sure we're exactly parallel together. Now, we're gonna go ahead and start cutting, but I do want to talk a little bit about rotary cutters. There's different styles of rotary cutters out there, and there is not a right or wrong. It's what you like and what you've used, but there's a little bit different ways of holding different rotary cutters. So with this plastic template, we want to cut through the thickest part of the rotary cutter blade in order for us to get all the way through our fabrics. So when we open this blade up, I'm using just kind of a standard stick style. When we look at this blade here, this is where our thickness is, not down here. So a lot of times people hold these rotary cutters just a bit different, and it's hard to get through all the layers, because if you're used to an ergonomic style rotary cutter, if you watch where this rotary blade comes out, the thickness is down here, not over here like the other one. So we're holding it differently depending on our rotary blade. And so when we look at this style here, if you're used to an ergonomic, the first thing that most people do is kind of do an overhand grip with it. This overhand grip, you can't get it high enough to get through where we want it to cut, which is about that 45 degrees right there. So we need to take our hand and we need to rotate it up, and we're gonna put this into kind of our palm here, and then kind of rest our fingers on top so it's not close to the blade, and it allows us to get to that 45-degree angle or to change our angle without killing our wrist. Also, I can use my body weight to cut with versus trying to use my wrist weight to cut, and that will help also with the strain of our hands. The second thing is I'm using a rotary cutter that's called a quick change rotary cutter, which I love. One of the reasons I love it is there's no bolts and nuts on the back of it to change the blade. You pull this back piece, blade comes out, you pull it off, put a new one on, push it down, snap it up. So it's really, really fast to change the blades. The other thing I like about it is it's a dual open of your safety section, so I can only open half of it and still covered here so it's protected. In our case, we're going to be working with a plastic template here, so I'm going to open up both sides of that so we can cut through the little bit thicker area through here. So that's a little bit about rotary cutters and kind of how to hold them and the different styles with them. So let's go ahead and let's get started cutting here. So we're going to go ahead, and the first thing we want to do is, again, we want to make sure we have that 0 crossed here. I'm not looking at the mat. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at my fabric and the template. The mat is something to cut on, but it is not something that I'm going to be using to square up with. The more we can cut with your rulers versus with the mat, the more accurate you're going to be. So the one thing I do love about this is we can do it right-handed or left-handed. I'm demoing right-handed today, but you can also do it left-handed. So when we go to work with this plastic template to cut with, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up our edge here. Now when we fold the fabrics, they're not going to be perfect because we're trying to work with the grain of this way, not with how it was cut originally. So we want to move the template over enough that we're going to be cutting off what we don't need to square it up nicely. This first cut, in this type of grid, there's like a little teardrop here. I'm going to put my rotary blade in the teardrop, and we're going to go ahead and cut that nice. And then the first thing I do is we're going to take that extra piece and get rid of it. What that does is I can push this template down and kind of push it up against the fabric so it is nice and steady now. So with that helps so this doesn't move on us and gives us that little bit of extra oomph to help us from shifting. So now I'm ready to cut my strip sizes that I need. So when we go to look at our instructions, I'm working on accent C right now, and the way these directions are laid out are wonderful. I love the way that they're laid out. So he has the top one is the largest one and works down to the smallest. So it's really, really nice as if we make oops or mistakes, we can cut those bigger strips down for our smaller strips instead of starting with our smaller and going big. So that's one thing that you can carry on to all of your projects is always start with the largest cut and trim down from there, okay? So the first cut on this one is 3.5 inches, and I'm working on the lap size here. So it's gonna be my first number on my cut chart. So it says here that we need 3.5 inch strips, okay? So we're gonna come over here to 3.5 and go ahead and cut. One of the tricks with working with this is we want to pull our rotor cutter straight up and not cock our wrist, because then we'll hit the template as we go. Then we're just gonna go to our next 3.5, which is 7 inches. We're gonna cut, bring it up, and then another 3.5. And we have cut now our 3 pieces with it. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna move this fabric off to the side for the moment. We have our 3 strips. It now tells us we're gonna do a sub cut on that. So sub cut or second cut, so now we're gonna cut this piece up. I'm working with a small mat to show you that with this small mat, we can actually move the mat around to do some sub cutting without touching your strips, which is really kind of cool. You could also do it on a larger mat on like a corner and work on a corner of a table instead of just on one side. So I'm gonna gently take this mat and just rotate it. And now I'm ready to bring my shape cut back over. We're gonna line it up on our cut pieces, okay? And it should all nice and line up, nice and square again here. So again, our first cut is to clean all of our selvages off, okay? And cut off that fold. So here's that fold, and we're gonna be trimming those selvages off. Our subcut size is going to be 2.5 inches. So I'm going to cut on my 0, okay? And then we're gonna come over to 2.5, and then 5, okay, 7.5. And this is where we can pull those out to kind of stabilize it if we need to at the very beginning here before I moved on. It tells us how many we truly need. So we need a total of 48 pieces that we have here. The way I'm cutting is we are getting 4 pieces per section. So there's 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, so there's another 12. So there's 3 12s. So we actually need 1 more cut. So I'm gonna come over here, and since I moved it, if we take this, you can kind of slide it over until that again, snuggles that area. These should be parallel on our numbers, and we're gonna go ahead and cut on our 2.5 again. And then there's our scraps that we can either toss or save. And again, there is my another 12. So 12 times 4 should be our 48 that we need. So once I have it here, I am now going to find my label. So this particular one is Q. So I'm gonna grab my Q label and we're gonna put it on top. Now, you can have like a little tray next to you, or sometimes I use a big ruler that I don't use all the time, and I set it next to me and I put all of these pieces on top of it, so then all I can do is take the tray to my sewing table or the ruler to my sewing table, and now I don't have little pieces everywhere. They're contained into a section. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and set these off to the side with my label onto them. So our next section, it tells us to do is we're going to do 2.5-inch squares. So when we go to do our 2.5-inch squares, again, we want to put our fabric on our piece here. And we want to line up that bottom again. Now, we had that first cut, and if we put that down and it still lines up perfectly on this line here, and it lines up perfectly here, we can use that clean cut. If it doesn't, don't stress, just move it over and we'll just clean that up on the 0 again like we did the first time, and then continue cutting. So it looks like mine was pretty good. It didn't shift too much on me here, so I'm gonna go ahead and push this into it. And it tells me on my directions that I now need 7 2.5-inch pieces. Now, in order to get all 7 of them, I can use this ruler, but I'm using the small part of the mat, so I'm gonna pull it over just a little bit here so I can get it all on. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut our 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, and 17.5 will give us our 7 strips that we need. And again, we're gonna now do our sub cutting. So I can take this mat, and even though the numbers are upside down, guess what? We're not using the mat, we're just using it as something to cut on. So don't worry about that. But when I go to do my sub cutting on this one, do we see we're a little too long? So we do have to do it in 2 sections here. So because we're gonna have to do it in 2 sections, it'll probably be easy just to divide it and do 4, and then we'll do the other 3. So I'm gonna put this onto it again. And we're gonna go ahead and clean up on the 0. If we take those away, that will give us a little bit of that security. And now we're gonna go 2.5, 5, 7.5, and 10. Okay, so our first ones, let's see what we have. Again, we have 4 layers here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 is an easy number for me to count. 4 times 5 is 20, so there's 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That one just wants to come. 5. So there is 20. There's 40. Stack these up a little nicer here. There we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2, 4, 6, and then I have an extra little pile there. So then we're going to gently slide these back onto our mat. So we're ready to do our sub cutting. And when I look at my directions, again, we want a total of 110 of these 2.5-inch squares. So we're going to go ahead and cut on the 0 again. Let's take away those. We're going to go 2.5, 5, 7.5. There's my 10. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, So we have 2, 4, 6, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 10. And I have 4, there's 8. And so 8, 9, and 10. So we just only have to have 2 of those to get our 110 of those. And then that would be extra or oopses. So we can set those off to the side. Or we can trim them down for a smaller one if we just need a couple little pieces for something else later. So again, I want to find my label. So my label on this one here is going to be R. So I'm going to set my R's right on top. And now I can stack them in a beautiful pile and then go ahead and put them off to the side. What do we think? Pretty cool so far? It goes nice and fast, and this is where a lot of people tell me, I hate cutting. Cutting's the worst part of quilting. And I say, I love cutting. And they look at me pretty funny, that's okay. But the reason why I like it is tools like these. This makes it so much easier, fast, we get lots done, and then we can get on to our fun sewing part. So the next thing that we have is our 2 1/4 inch strips is the next one. So we look at it and go, oh no, I only have 1/2 inches on here. Can I do a 1/4 inch on this, or do I have to go back to my normal ruler that I use? The answer is yes, you can do 1/4 inches on this. So there's a little tiny piece of paper that comes with your ruler here that has a formula on the bottom of it that tells you the secret to doing 1/4 inches. Now, of course, what's the first thing that we do with that? It sometimes gets put in the round file, right? So we have copied it off of ours to keep on hand, and I've had girls that just laminate it and actually put it right with the ruler, so it's always with the ruler 24/7. So that's an option. Or we keep a binder that has all of our fun handouts and things like that into it. And so that is a way to be able to keep that, to be able to reference it again. So we're gonna go ahead and pull out that sheet so we can find and not have to do the math in our head. It's already done for us, so we might as well use it. So let's go ahead and grab our fabric here. And now we want to grab our sheet. Okay, so here's our sheet. This is what came with the ruler itself. And so that's the one thing that you want to keep around. And the bottom part is what we're going to be talking about right here. So when we look at it, I have printed lots of them off to keep around and put in my different binders. And so the way that this works when we look at it, it has the formula for the different 3/4 inches on here. So there's actually 3/4 inch, 1 1/4, 1 3/4, 2 1/4, 2 3/4, and so on up. So right now we're working with the 2 1/4 inch strip, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and get our shape cut back up here, and we're gonna set it up nicely again. Again, if we have it here and it fits up against our original cut, go ahead and use it. If not, we'll trim it up and get it going again here. So the way that this works is it says that we have what we call our first cuts. So we have our first cuts, which is going to be 0, 4 1/2, 9, 13 1/2, and 18. Every time you do a first cut, you're going to get 2 strips, okay? So let's check and see how many strips do we truly need of the 2 1/4. So in this case, on this fabric, we only need 3 strips for the 2 1/4. So what we're going to do is our first cuts, the first cut we do, we're going to get 2 strips, and we don't need 4, so we're going to stop. So our first cut was 0 to clean it up, and mine's cleaned up. So we're going to go ahead and do the next cut, which is 4 1/2. Okay. And because I'm doing such a little amount, if we're doing a lot of them, we would just keep going with the formula. So then it says the next thing we're going to do is we're going to shift the shape cut plus to the 1/4 inch mark. So what that means is I'm going to gently pick up this end so it doesn't catch on any fabric, and we're going to shift it over until the edge of my fabric that was cleaned up is now on this little dotted line right here, okay? Now it tells us we're going to do our second cut. So our second cut is going to be 2.5. And then we need a third piece. So we have 1, 2. So we're gonna do one more cut on our second cuts, which is 7, to get that extra piece. So when I pull that off, do you see how we have 3 of those 2¼ inch pieces? Pretty cool, huh? So now we're going to do, guess what? We're gonna subcut. So we're gonna take, again, our mat, we're gonna rotate it. This time we're gonna get to do a little bit more practice with this. So we are subcutting this into our 2¼ inch squares. So again, we're gonna start with our first cut. So our first cut is to clean it up, cutting on the 0. And again, we can get rid of that section to hold it nicely for us. And now we're ready to do our first cut. So we're at 0, we're at 4.5, and then we're going to go to 9. And that's as far as we can go on the ruler. So then we're gonna go ahead and lift this up, and we're gonna shift it to that 1/4 inch mark, okay? And now we're gonna do our second cut. So our second cuts in this case is 2.5, 7, and the next one would be 11.5, and we don't have that. So we're gonna have to stop there. Again, we have 4 layers here. And so our 4 layers, we need a total of 48 of those. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 20. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is another 20. So there's 40. And there is our 48. Okay, so again, we have a little bit of extra pieces we can go ahead and set off to the side to use later if we need them. And then we're gonna put our sticker on them. So this one is labeled as S, okay? But before we move on, we have one more thing we have to do. On our directions, it has a little box with a line going diagonally onto it. When we look at his symbols up here, it says cut corner to corner once. So we're now going to cut these squares. So I'm gonna take my little sticker off for a moment. We're now gonna take these squares and we're gonna, what they call cross cut them. So we're gonna cross cut them from corner to corner. So again, the first natural thing for you to do is to pull out a normal ruler and go ahead and cut from corner to corner. In this case, I'm gonna use the shape cut again. I know, surprise, surprise, right? So when we look at this, I like the shape cut for 2 reasons when we do cross cutting. One is it's gonna hold both sides down for us nice and flat as we cut diagonally. The second reason is when we look at this, you can see how I have these 2 45-degree lines. If I set those on top of this square here, my 9 is where it's laying right now, should be from corner to corner here. And that makes sure that we have a nice 45-degree line from here. And it tells us that we have a square to start off with. If that didn't come out and it came out sideways, that means that we probably didn't start with a square to begin with. So especially those weird increments like 2 7/8, 1 3/8, things like that. Sometimes we accidentally cut 2 1/4 and then the other side is the 3/8, okay? So that will show us immediately if we don't have a square. And so it gives us a second help to make sure that we are cutting this a perfect square, and then we're cutting it diagonally from corner to corner. So then there is my beautiful little triangles. So then we're gonna go ahead and cut all of those. I won't do that for time-wise here, but I'll show you that one more time. We're gonna take this, make sure they're layered on top of each other. We're gonna find that 45-degree line. And then we're gonna cut from corner to corner to make our beautiful triangles. Once we have our triangles done, we'll go ahead and put our label onto them, and then we're ready to set those off to the side and move on to our next strip. So as you can see, we're getting smaller and smaller as we go down the list, which is wonderful because it allows us to start with our biggest piece, and then when we get towards the end, we're using our small pieces. So the last cut that we have for this particular fabric is 2-inch strips. And we need a total of 8 of those 2-inch strips. So again, I'm going to lay my ruler across the bottom here and make sure that we're still parallel up here. And again, if we need to clean it up, clean it up. If not, we'll use that original cut. And now we're going to go ahead and cut our 2-inch strips. And so we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't quite cut that. There we go. 6, 7, and 8. So now I'm just going to pick up my strips, because on this one, it tells us we have no subcutting on it. We're just going to save them for strip sets. So we're going to put our label T onto that one and go ahead and set it off to the side. So then this is our leftover scrap that we can add to our other pieces for any oops or anything that we need, or it becomes our scrap bag afterwards. So there is one of those. So we have our strips, we have our subcutting of our strips, we have our cross cutting from corner to corner using all of our shape cut. So we have one of our fabrics down out of all of our fabrics that we have here. And again, we have our background, our main, and then we have 3 accents, and then of course the binding piece. So the next thing that might be a little different on your instructions you might not have come across before is a word that says, instead of width of fabric, which is what we've been doing, is with our selvages, is one that is listed as length of fabric, so LOF. So when we go to do our length of fabric, it's going to be our border piece is what it is. And we love doing that as our border pieces, because then we don't have to piece our big wide borders together. So length of fabric can be very, very helpful in making sure that we have some beautiful borders. And the length of the grain doesn't stretch as much on us. So again, it helps square our quilt off later on. And it lays out nice and beautiful once we get our borders. So let's go ahead and grab our main piece. This is a yummy piece here that we have for this. And I have it, again, ironed, so we have it opened completely up from our selvages, so I have a single layer here. And we're going to do that because we're going to be cutting through quite a few layers, and if we keep it folded in half, it's too many layers to cut through because it is so long. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut length of fabric. So length of fabric is actually parallel with your selvage. So we're going to cut this direction versus across your selvage, which is width of fabric. So the easiest way is we're going to go ahead and, since it's single layer, we'll fold it with our selvages here. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and fold it again. And that gives us our 4 layers. So you can use a traditional ruler with it, or I'm going to go ahead and continue using the shape cut. So I need to fold it one more time in order to get it small enough. Because as you can see here, we're about 18 inches on this one. On your queen size, it's going to be a lot more than that. And so I'm going to go ahead and set this up on my table. So we can see this beautiful, yummy fabric. Okay, and you can see this fabric is not cut very straight to begin with here. And so we always want to reference our folds. Again, we want to make sure that those are parallel to each other because we need to cut a 90 degree from that fold. I'm going to fold it one more time. to get it to fit under that ruler. So when I lay it up here, we want to reference those folds again. So we want to make sure that this fold is parallel to this fold, is parallel to this back fold here. And if it's not, we can adjust it just a little bit to make sure that it is folded. So when I look at this one here, we're a little bit thicker on this side than we are down here. So I'm going to adjust it just a tiny bit. And then we'll come over here. So now you can see we're a little bit more even on both sides of that. That's what we're looking for. And now we're ready to trim our selvages off on that first cut. And we're going through quite a bit of layers there. And so now it's going to I'm going to push that down to give me that little bit of bump. And it tells me on my instructions, we're going to cut 6.5 inches. So I'm going to come over here to 6.5. And then we're going to 6.5 times 2 is 13. And the next one is off my grid here. So we want to cut a total of 4 of those. So then as we open this up, we should have a nice straight strip where my fold was. That's our goal, is every time we have that nice strip there. Okay, so I have 2 here. We're gonna go ahead and bring this next. And if you feel like it's moved on you or adjusted, it's okay to readjust it and to fold it again. If it helps, you can go on the other side. We can start with our clean piece here. And if you feel like it's just moving on you, it's okay to refold it. There's nothing wrong with that. So if I base it off of my other selvages again, we can come here, bring it up. We're gonna get a nice flat edge there. And I'm gonna bring my selvages up. Again, I want to check and see, did I fold it okay? We want to make sure this is parallel to this, is parallel to that. So this one gives us a good marking on the 10. Looks like this is pretty even that way, and we look pretty good down there. I'm not far enough in, so I'm going to slide it down just a little bit. And also on this first cut, we can always check and see, did we get through, because we have so many layers here, did we get through them all? Did we cut all the selvages off? Are we missing any? So you can always open these up to see, okay, I do have a piece that goes from top to bottom, and it looks like I did get all of my selvages off. So if we see that, oh, I got a little too close, we can just shift the ruler over and clean it back up again. And that's not a problem. So again, we want to cut 2 more, 6.5 and 13. And right now, we're not worried about how crooked this is on this side here where the original was. In the pattern, when we get to our quilt, we will be measuring these later to fit our quilt. So right now, we're just cutting yardage or length of pieces. And again, we want that beautiful, nice, straight strip instead of that rainbow strips that we have. It looks like we did pretty well on that one. And so we're gonna go ahead and set those off to the side. And some patterns, when we do length of fabric here, you can actually use the leftover as your binding if you want to. And then you only have to piece your binding in 4 sections, and so you have long binding. It is length of grain binding, so it doesn't have as much stretch to it, but it still works on your regular rectangle or square quilts. Of course, curved quilts and things like that, we do have to do our specialty binding of our bias, and so that's the difference. So if you decide that you would like this one as your binding instead, you are welcome to cut your size of binding you like. We normally do 2.5. In the pattern, he has it at 2.25. So it just depends on how you sew your binding and what method. We like our binding a little bit thicker and sew it a little bit wider to give us a nice, good binding edge. Others like the 2.25, and so it is a little bit smaller, narrow binding, and either works just fine. So we're gonna go ahead and set that off to the side as our extra piece. And then we can check it off of our list here and then go on to our next one. So that is the only other different terminology you might not have seen or read before in two patterns, and to do length of fabric with it. So you are now ready and have all the tools and tips to be able to cut all of your fabrics out and label as you go, so we're ready for our next video. When we start our fun clues, we are going to be doing some different demos on items and tools. One that is written with the pattern is essential to the quilt. You do have to have it. Is called the Simple Folded Corners Ruler. And this is gonna give us some amazing corners on our pieces here. We've been playing with this ruler and using it in our block of the months. And this beautiful quilt that is behind me, which is why I have it here, we use this ruler on every single block that we have. And they make these wonderful, beautiful corners off here that match perfectly as we go down our quilt. Even these little baby ones that we have here, this ruler allows us to have that beautiful corner that sometimes is a little bit hard, and there's no marking. We don't have to mark from corner to corner and try to sew on that line. So it's kind of a fun one. I'm very excited for you to play with it and use it. And we're going to show you some fun different techniques using this ruler. The only thing different on that ruler is it does not have any grips to it. So it's just a plain ruler. So our favorite is the true grips to put on the back of the ruler so it doesn't slide on you. And they're just clear round pieces that you can put onto the ruler in different places to kind of stabilize it. And we do that on any non-slip or rulers that don't have a non-slip already on them. So that is called true grips. The other products we're going to show you with ironing is the Precision Piecing products. If you've not heard of this before, it's a Canadian designer that actually works with miniatures, and that's where she came up with this program. There is a really, really lightweight glue that will show you to help you in some of your smaller pieces, but it's not necessary to use if you don't want to. But it is a light enough glue it's a heat set, but you can peel apart your pieces if you put it wrong, and then you'd have to put a little bit more glue to put it back again. So if you ever open up seams or things like that, you can use this glue and still get that seam apart to get it into it. So it's pretty cool. The other one I use all the time is called the Easy Press Pin. And then we add this Easy Press solution. It's kind of an alternative starch that we put into it. And this allows us to be able to put it right where we want it. And we put it on a seam line and it gives us crisp, flat pieces. So we'll be showing you how to use that and how cool it is and how flat we can get it for our small little pieces. So that is a couple of products that we will be showing throughout. Plus, there's lots of tips and tricks that we'll be showing you through your mystery journey. One of the fun ones that I love is you saw we had a pile of strips. So nowadays, we work a lot of times with what we call stratas or strips, and we sew a bunch of strips together, and then we have to cut them apart. So we are going to do some fun tips of how to sew those so we don't get any more rainbow strips again. So we are working on our cutting to get them straight, and then also sewing can make a difference with that. So we're going to be working with that and showing you how to cut stratas, sew them, is another part of the tutorials that we will be doing. So hopefully you will be excited to join us with this mystery journey. We have some beautiful fabrics. If you have not purchased your kit yet, that we have available in kits in either the queen or the lap size, or you're welcome to find your own fabrics with the yardage that you need. We are so excited that you are joining us with this virtual sew along, and I hope that you learned something today that you can take into your quilting and use every day. And that's what we hope to work on. Our theme for this year is skill building and working on building those basic skills that we need and beyond. So I hope that you can join us again for other projects through the years and block of the months that we have, and enjoy this mystery journey. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we will see you later on our clue number 1.